Yeah, Congressman, this one comes from Scott Richardson, and he's asking, what's the solution to our long-term infrastructure funding issues, and how will that impact I-49?
Let's go to Congressman Westerman on this one. What are the prospects for a big infrastructure, $1 trillion type program that the president talked about in his campaign that would require likely bipartisan support?
And I think an infrastructure project will get bipartisan support, and I agree with Congressman Womack. I wish we had started with that. Maybe it would have set a different tone here in D.C. had we done that. But when you look at funding streams, that's the problem with an infrastructure project, is how do you pay for $1 trillion? And there's actually more infrastructure work in our country that needs to be done than $1 trillion. In the president's proposed budget, they had $200 billion that they proposed for infrastructure, and there's a myriad of ways to fund infrastructure. One thing that's been done in Australia is called recycling, where you actually take state and local infrastructure such as water treatment, sewer treatment, airports. Those are leased for 50 years, and you put the money into an infrastructure account. You've got offshore money that could be brought back in and raise funds that way. You hear a lot about private-public partnerships. When you look around the country, there's places where that works better than other places. I know the Mobile Bay, Interstate 10 is one of the busiest interstates in the country, and the tunnel going under Mobile Bay is the bottleneck on it. So the city of Mobile would like to put a toll bridge over the bay. You could pay for a toll bridge over Mobile Bay, but there's really not any place in Arkansas where tolls work. So it's going to be a multi-pronged approach, and I always tell people this: we're paying about $300 billion a year in interest payments on the debt, and the Highway Trust Fund was short $15 billion last year. So in the big picture, we've got to address our debt issue, our mandatory spending issues, and that's one thing that the budget does. We were looking at over $200 billion of mandatory spending savings in the budget. So let's work on the budget and generate revenue streams so that we can do things that everybody wants to do, and that's infrastructure
Are you
projects.
concerned that as we move forward, if we go from tax reforms to tax cuts to infrastructure spending, that this is just spend, spend, spend? Like, when do you get to the actual cutting?
Well, that's the issue that Steve and I dealt with on the budget committee, is how do we get a budget that balances in 10 years, that addresses the concerns that we have. And when you look at our spending, the 12 appropriation bills that that Steve and the appropriation committee has been working on, that's $1 trillion. The spending last year was $4 trillion. 3/4 of what we spend is in mandatory spending on cruise control. We can't balance the budget on mandatory spending. We're going to have to address the tough issues, or we can't balance it on discretionary. We've got to address the tough issues with mandatory spending, and we're starting to look at that.